Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. This is a special occasion. We're so glad you're here. We're just going to get right into it. I want to introduce you to Tom's very good friend, childhood friend, Mark Lawdy.
Tom Vaught was not a captain of industry. The few bucks that he had in his pocket when he went into the medical center of the Rockies for the last time was about all he had to show for his material accumulations on this planet. His published works consisted mostly of the handful of poems that he sent into various Western lifestyle magazines over the last couple of years. And he didn't have any patents or big scientific discoveries to his credit. But Tom Vaught was the most extraordinary person I've ever known in my life, and everyone in this room knows exactly what I mean. There are certain people who are indelibly connected to a particular time and place. You can't think of Paris in the 20s without thinking of Hemingway and Fitzgerald. You can't think of Vegas in the 50s without thinking of Sinatra. And you cannot think of Armonk in the 1980s without thinking of Tom Vaught. For those who only knew Tom as the affable Gotham bon vivant, it may be hard to picture, but when Tom came to us in Armonk in 1978, he was actually a little bit of a badass. He'd come up in Larchmont and Mamaroneck with the last of the 70s Southern Westchester greasers, a line that notably included the Cassara brothers and Tom's own brother, Mike. And at least to us, lily-livered, naive suburbanites in Armonk, he was a different breed. In 5th grade, he was the first one to start rolling off campus to go down to Armonk at lunchtime and eat lunch at Pizza Land. He was the first one to know about Budweiser and cigarettes and the Doors and Black Sabbath. He was the first one to stand up in class and loudly say "fuck you" to a teacher. That was something that didn't happen every day at H.C. Crittenden Middle School, I can tell you that. My kids are here today, so I'll refrain from commenting on various other firsts that Tom recorded after that point, but you get the idea. But Tom was so much more than just another suburban miscreant. His adolescent bravado was always softened with a big-hearted humor and an enthusiasm for people from all walks of life. I joined Facebook the day after Tom died, after however many years of not doing that, because that's where all the reminiscing was going on. It was amazing to see how many people said things like, "I was never one of the cool kids, but Tom was always nice to me." It was that combination of ballsiness and sensitivity, audacity and empathy that set him on his path in life. It was reflected in the role models he chose, the icons that guided him on his way. People like Hemingway, Pigpen, Hunter S. Thompson. Those were the kinds of people he admired most. Artists with balls, bikers with soul. Our kids are at the age now where kids first start breaking off into little groups and cliques, and sometimes they'll say to me and Janet, "What was that like for you?" And for Janet, that's very straightforward. Glens Falls High, class of 1989, forget it. You had your jocks, your preps, your grubs, and your dokens. Period. End of story. But at Armonk, there was a little while there in the mid-'80s where those boundaries got a little blurry. Blurry enough that a star football player could not only become friends with a bunch of weird artsy kids, but would actually end up pursuing a career on stage and screen himself. The guy who worked at the Texaco station could hang with the ham radio enthusiasts and the theater kids. The least studious kids palled around with the most studious kids, the rich kids with the not so rich kids, and so on. I don't want to make it sound like a paradise, it certainly wasn't that, but for a little while there, the boundaries that rigidly define life in most American high schools broke down pretty dramatically. And everything I just said, 100% of it, was because of Tom Vaught. He was the greatest connector of people I've ever known in my life, able to draw people together of every size, shape, and specification. And that didn't end in high school. I mean, look at the people in this room. Entrepreneurs and country musicians, tavern keepers and writers, doctors, pot farmers, salesmen, chefs. Tom drew legions of people to himself and then fashioned them into an entire society, the way a mountain creates its own weather. I've lost my train of thought. All right, I'm going to the crutch. Right. How did Tom do that? What was it about him that made that happen? I think the answer is actually pretty simple. Tom loved people in all their messy variety, and he had a genius-level EQ that let him find something fascinating and wonderful in just about anyone or anything. Rob Gilardi posted something beautiful recently about going to a Yankees game with Tom years ago, and how Tom made a beautiful day of it even though he didn't really care about baseball. That was classic Tom. Even when it wasn't really his thing, he'd find a way in. Maybe it was the personal backstory of the guy playing the Hammond organ, or the guy from Arthur Avenue who's been selling peanuts in the same section at Yankee Stadium every Yankees game since the bicentennial, or the history of the seventh inning stretch, whatever. He'd find a way in. Tom was interested in the whole world, and the whole world returned the favor. When Tom got sick, some of us maybe got a little pushy about inserting ourselves into the situation. Others maybe got a little too sensitive about that. I'm not judging anybody, I probably did it too. But why did that happen? What was it that made so many people feel proprietary about Tom? Why did so many people feel they had to be courtside with Tom through this whole messy affair? I think it's because Tom wasn't just our friend, companion, fellow traveler, partner in crime, brother in arms. He was also like a kind of mirror that you could look into and see the best bits that you wanted to see in yourself. For so many of the people in this room, Tom helped define who we are, who we wanted to be, what we wanted to show the world of ourselves. And whatever it was you wanted to be, artist, adventurer, intellectual, hobo, you could find it in Tom. Like his hero, Walt Whitman, who went around in Tom's satchel until the very end, Tom contained multitudes. I started out talking about the Armonk days, but Armonk Tom was only one part of the story. There was also Fire Island Tom and Block Island Tom, Mississippi Delta Tom, Dead Tour Tom, Grand Lounge Tom, Colorado Tom. There was Tom at the Haberdashery and Tom at the Hells Angels Clubhouse, and Tom with the rich old ladies at the West Palm Beach Croquet Club, and Tom at the Train Museum, and Tom at the VFW Hall, Tom at the Victrola Dealer, and Tom at the Beard and Mustache Championship, and Tom at the Flea Market, and Tom at Peter Luger's, and of course, Tom at the bar. In Tuesdays with Maury, Maury says, everybody knows they're gonna die, but nobody believes it. Actually, I never found it that difficult to believe that I will die, but never in a million years did I think that Tom Vaught would. I know, there's a certain amount of paradox to that last sentence. Anybody who ever spent a night out in the town with that guy and came away saying, man, that guy's living on borrowed time? Believe me, you weren't the first person to say that. But Tom liked to say that he was strong like Polish bull. And man, was he ever. Here's a list of some of the things that guy did with stage 4 prostate cancer and a back full of broken bones. Split a cord of firewood at Alan Megan's place up in the mountains. By the way, he would later claim that he caught cancer in that woodpile, but I'm pretty sure that's untrue. Joined a volunteer crew digging out the ruins of Santa Rosa after the Sonoma firestorms. Took down the surly drifter who tried to steal his jacket at the men's shelter where he stayed while working on that volunteer crew. Fell in love with a vivacious woman considerably his junior. Tom raised having a good time to an art form, a kind of improvisational, jazz-like performance art, sometimes highly abstract, sometimes quite the opposite. A night out with Tom had a life of its own. It might end with the invention of a new form of billiards using broomsticks and cocktail glasses on the deserted main concourse of Grand Central at 4 o'clock in the morning. Or it might end in a fabulous mansion on Long Island Sound surrounded by priceless African art, or in the back of a police car, or in some stranger's apartment in Canarsie, or on the lawn of the post office in Bar Harbor, Maine. Going around with Tom, you didn't always get where you were going, but you always got somewhere. But Tom's life certainly wasn't all sunrise martinis. He had more than his fair share of tragedy as the years went on. That included the loss of several close friends who predeceased him, as well as the three big tragedies that defined his adult life: the crushing loss of his brother Mike, his mother, and Phil Casara, who was as much family as friend. And those things really affected him. I think most people think of Tom as a very positive, uplifting, life of the party kind of guy, and rightly so. But sometimes late at night when the crowds had died down, he was also capable of moments of pensive sadness. And I sometimes think that was part of why he always had to be around other people. I mean, Tom genuinely loved the company of everybody in this room and almost everybody on earth, to be honest. But I sometimes felt like there was something almost compulsive about his need to be around other people all the time. And if I'm honest about it, that could sometimes be a little exhausting for me, at least personally. I can remember a fall afternoon years ago when Janet and I had been out at the bars with him all night, followed by some multi-hour brunch, followed by the obligatory tour of some gigantic flea market. And now the shadows were getting long, and I had to go to work the next day. And Tom just wanted to keep going. We'll go out to Sheepshead Bay. We'll get the pierogies. We'll have a couple of vodkas. I just didn't have the strength, and so begged off with some made-up excuse. What I wouldn't give to have that afternoon back now. Life is hard in so many ways, but sometimes there are compensations. For me, one of them is that Tom spent most of his last winter with my family in California, and so got to know my kids, Kate and Sam. Now we'll always have the memory of him eating a raccoon burger, stuffing his beard with matches and drink umbrellas, and then setting it all ablaze that night at Pastino's. Running West Side storylines with Kate, teaching Sam how to get the lighting just right on his dragon sketches, filling our house with paintings and theatrics and ascots and improvisation and uproarious laughter. Our kids are at the age when some people start to conclude that the path to success is to be just like everybody else. But Tom showed them proof positive that instead you can be your own little David Bowie, scare the world to death with your originality. And that the coolest thing of all is to unapologetically be the person that you really are. Bravely, enthusiastically, and with an open heart. And that about sums it up. Turns out after all this blathering on, I didn't really have anything more to say than what Dave Horowitz was able to say in 3 words on the front of a t-shirt. Tom is life.
Now I got to follow Mark Laudy. I had a 2.3 in high school. This guy's a genius. How am I going to follow that? Tommy, like with Mark, Tommy colored my world for 40 years, showing me places I'd have never gone, people I'd have never known, tastes I'd have never tasted, songs I'd have never heard. And though yes, I would have wished that he was with us longer. I miss him every day. And the 50 years that God loaned him to us for, yes, I wish there were 100. But I will point out, and most of you know this, that those 50 years were lived with a record-shattering viscosity level, one that should never be attempted again by any human. So I would say that Tommy got his money's worth in many ways, although you know he's still here anyway. He used to have a lot of Tom Vaughttianisms, like, everybody ought to know how to play a song on piano, or I think it went, every man ought to know how to play at least one song on piano, at least. And I was like, all right, so I gotta go. It's just hard to keep up with your things, Tom. Like, so I gotta go look for Treasure in the Sierra Madre. I gotta go ride the rails. I gotta go tour the dead, and I gotta learn a song on piano. But I'm like, well, I'll try. And then when he rode off into the sunset that night in November 3rd, 2018, that beautiful room overlooking the Rocky Mountains, and Johnny Pincaldo was playing guitar, and he had all the love around him. Whether you were in the room or not, whether you were in the hospital or not, you were with him, and he knew how loved he was. It was the first time in my life I said, yeah, life goes quickly. And because he was with me for most of my life. And I started rethinking a lot of the Tom Vaughtienisms. And I realized that, yeah, most of them are total bullshit. But there's one or two, and the only one more nervous about what's about to happen is Al Feldman, but he's backing me up, and he's a pro. So. Well, my time went so quickly, I went lickety-splitty. We're gonna do it one more time. Tommy, we're still learning, Tommy, all right? And well, my time went so quickly, I went lickety-splitty out to my home 55. As I pulled away slowly, feeling so holy, God knows I was feeling alive. And the sun coming up, I'm riding with Lady Love. Freeway comes and trucks, stars beginning to fade. Okay? And I lead the parade, just a wishing I'd stay a little longer. Oh Lord, the feeling getting stronger. Well, it's 6 in the morning, you gave me no warning, I had to be on my way. Ah, fuck. The trucks all a passing me, lights all a flashing, I'm on my way home from your place. And the sun's coming up, riding with Lady Love. Freeway cars and trucks, stars beginning to fade. And I lead the parade, wishing I'd stay a little longer. Oh Lord, let the feeling get stronger. Well, time went so quickly, I went lickety-splitty until my whole 55. Fuck the piano. As I pulled away slowly, feeling so holy, God knows I was feeling alive. And the sun's coming up, I'm riding with Lady Love. Freeway cars and trucks, freeway cars and trucks, freeway cars and trucks.
Hi. I'm just going right with the crutch from the get. I'm Suzanne Lawson. Sue, to a few of you in this crowd. Susie, to some who have known me for a real long time. Circa 1983, Tom and I, we were young Americans. Tom was 14 and I was 16. And after we swapped leather biker jackets, he in my white one procured from Chess King in the Galleria, and me in his black, passed down from the brothers, I think. He asked me out. We shared many firsts together, and between about 1992 and early November 2018, if you were tending bar, sitting at the bar, enjoying luncheon with your grandparents, or strolling the streets of Fort Collins, he'd be sure to let you know that I took his virginity. Now, there was a piece of him that wanted to embarrass me, but there was a bigger piece that wanted to mark history, recognize longevity, and celebrate nostalgia. He loved that, as you all know, Tom Vaught style. I love the way he remembers every detail, every nuance. Not only were our times with Tom some of the best of our lives, but Tom's retelling of those times were what make them legendary. Now, we know Tom loved the fellas. Yeah, boys. Yeah, boys. But we of the kinder, gentler sex know that Tom adored us. I still have "Hey, baby" on my voicemail, as I'm sure many of you ladies do. He loves the way we move, feel, talk, think, smell, dress, and laugh. And he loved to be loved by us. Tom loved his women deeply and with his whole heart, proudly right on out in the open on his sleeve. If you were his lover or his friend, and I was lucky to have been both, he wanted to crawl inside you. I remember when I told my sister he was sick, she said, "No one loves you like Tom loves you." And I think that can be said for each of us. I'm going to share a letter you wrote me in 1983. And I have a whole bunch of them back there for later. And he could have written it to all of us. I love you. I just got thrown out of Spanish. I came in late, and she told me to stop wasting time, and I started running off at the mouth about how she was a hypocrite and how that wasn't solving anything. So she threw me out. But I don't want to hear about it. I want to hear about Pebbles in Benedict's nursery and you. When we were standing in front of my science class, I was just looking at you and laughing because I can't believe you. You actually love me. Once someone said, "Tom, you'll never find a best friend or a girl who you really like here. You'll probably find one in college or something, but not here." They were so wrong. You are my best friend and my girlfriend, and I love you. What I see in you is what I never saw in anyone else combined. And I don't know what to say in these fucking letters. I'm sorry I'm yelling. I'm not yelling at you. I'm yelling at myself. Sue, I love you. Yes, signed, me.
Testing. Well, once upon a time, we went out to Alex Griezmann's 40th birthday party in Tucson, where Tom and I went vest shopping. And afterwards, we went down to Richard's Ranch, down in the middle of, well, down in the middle of almost Mexico, basically. And along the way, Tom and I figured out that we both kind of knew the Death Letter song from Son House. And so for the first of many times, we kind of performed it around a campfire. Got a letter this morning, how you reckon it read? Hurry, hurry, the girl you love is dead. I got a letter this morning, and how do you reckon it read? Hurry, hurry, the girl you love is dead. Well, I packed up my suitcase, went off down the road. By the time I got there, she was lying on the cooling board. I packed up my suitcase, drove off down the road. By the time that I got there, she was laying on a cooling board. There must have been 10,000 people standing around the burying ground. I didn't know I loved her till they put her in the ground. There was 10,000 people standing around that burying ground. I didn't know I loved her till they put her in the ground. Well, I folded my arms and slowly walked away. I ain't gonna see that girl no more till Judgment Day. I folded my arms and walked away. Didn't know I loved her till Judgment Day. I miss our friend Tom Vaught. Thanks for listening. Next up is our dear friend David Horowitz.
Y'all know me. I just thought that I would give people some advice on, we're all here now, and we're, hanging out with Tom, essentially, by hanging out with his friends and family, and by hanging out with his music and his memories. And unfortunately, tomorrow that won't be available, or any other tomorrows, really, but it actually will be, and I thought I would give you advice on how to hang out with Tom after this. So if you want to hang out with Tom for 5 minutes, you could listen to Old 55, which Chance played with Alan and Daria, and you could, so any Tom Waits song, that's 5 minutes with Tom. And then if you want to hang out with Tom for 2 hours, you got Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, that's 1 hour 40, and Jaws, which I think is like 2:08. So those are all great ways to hang out with Tom when you have a little time. But I'm going to tell you how to hang out with Tom for the summer. This is Lonesome Dove, which is not a thing Tom liked. That would not cover it. Tom, this is the good book. And even though he mostly quotes the TV series, but he means to quote the book. So I'm just going to get you all started. When Augustus came out on the porch, the blue pigs were eating a rattlesnake. Not a very big one. It had probably just been crawling around looking for shade when it ran into the pigs. They were having a fine tug of war with it, and its rattling days were over. The sow had it by the neck, and the shoat had it by the tail. "You pigs get," Augustus said, kicking the shoat. "Head on down to the creek, you want to eat that snake." It was the porch he begrudged them, not the snake. Pigs on the porch just made things hotter. And things were hot enough already. He stepped down into the dusty yard and walked around to the spring house to get his jug. The sun was still high, soared in the sky like a mule, but Augustus had a keen eye for the sun, and to his eye, the long light from the west had taken on an encouraging slant. Evening took a long time in Lonesome Dove, but when it came, it was comfort. For most of the hours of the day and most of the months of the year, the sun had the town trapped deep in the dust, far out in the Chaparral Flats, a heaven for snakes, horned toads, roadrunners, and stinging lizards, but hell for pigs and Tennesseans. There was not even a respectable shade tree within 30 miles. In fact, the actual location of the nearest decent shade was a matter of vigorous debate in the offices, if you wanted to call a roofless barn and a couple of patched-up corral roofs, the Hat Creek Cattle Company, half of which Augustus owned. His stubborn partner, Captain W.F. Call, maintained that there was excellent shade as close as Pickles Gap, only 12 miles away, but Augustus wouldn't allow it. Pickles Gap was, if anything, an even more worthless community than Lonesome Dove. It had only sprung up because a fool from North Georgia named Wesley Pickles had gotten himself and his family lost in the mesquites for about 10 days. When he finally found a clearing, he wouldn't leave it, and Pickles Gap came into being, mainly attracting travelers like its founders, which is to say, people too weak-willed to be able to negotiate a few hundred miles of mesquite thicket without losing their nerve. The spring house was a little lumpy adobe building, so cool on the inside that Augustus had been tempted to live in it, and had it not been for its popularity with black widows, yellow jackets, and centipedes. Sorry. Thank you. When he opened the door, he didn't immediately see any centipedes, but he did immediately hear the nervous buzz of a rattlesnake that was evidently smarter than the one the pigs were eating. Augustus could just make out the snake coiled in the corner, but decided not to shoot it. On a quiet spring evening in Lonesome Dove, a shot could cause complications. Everybody in the town would hear it, conclude that either the Comanches were down from the plains or the Mexicans were up from the river. If any customers at the Dry Bean, the town's only saloon, happened to be drunk or unhappy, which was very likely, they would probably run out in the street and shoot a Mexican or two just to be on the safe side. At the very least, Call would come stomping up the lots, only to be annoyed to discover it had just been a snake. Call had no respect whatsoever for snakes, or for anyone who stood aside for snakes. He treated rattlers like gnats, disposing of them with whatever tool he had in his hand. A man who slows down for snakes might as well walk, he often said. A statement that made about as much sense as to an educated man as most things Call said. Augustus held a more leisurely philosophy. He believed in giving creatures a little time to think, so he stood in the sun for a few minutes until the rattler calmed down and crawled out a hole. Then he reached in, lifted his jug out of the mud. It had been a dry year, even by the standards of Lonesome Dove, and the spring was just springing enough to make a nice mud puddle. The pigs spent half their time rooting around the spring house, hoping to get into the mud, but so far, none of the holes have been big enough to accommodate a pig. The damp burlap the jug was wrapped in naturally appealed to centipedes, so Augustus made sure none had sneaked in the wrapping before he uncorked the jug and took a modest swig. So, this is Spend the Summer with Tom Vaught by reading this. Yeah, boys.
David Bowie digital cocaine fireplace. Beaver top hats for all. Grain elevator, adjacent.
I mean, Tom was just a magical guy. I mean, he would pop up when you least expected it and most wanted it.
Who now?
I've been ballin' a shiny black steel jackhammer, been chipping up rocks for the great highway.
And what we're seeing here is a vast array of beef and meat, a large supply.
I live 5 years if I take my time, ballin' that jack and drinking my wine.
Despite the senator's drunkenness, he cannot explain his nudity.
For the sad few who have not met Tom, he was charmed and charming with a lot of id.
Well, everything with Tom was over the top. He always took it to another level. It was always the most grandiose.
Men, tuxedos, ladies, I'd like to have you in evening dresses, please.
I always used to describe him as like a throwback from a number of eras. He could have been from the gold rush. He could have been from, the 20s. He could have been from the 60s. I mean, and then he'll bust out with every lyric to a Beastie Boys song.
In some ways, he was always Tom, but he was also a chameleon, right? Like, he could be anywhere and hang with anybody.
And the river keeps a talking, but you never hear a word it say.
Sure drinks a lot.
Come hither, wench, and take thy strap.
Okay.
The night I met him, I said, "Who are you? Are you an actor?" And he said, "No, I'm a liver."
He was just this enormous light in your life that was always there. And he had this ability to keep that light on all the time.
I was ready for bed, and he was ready, to go all night and to sing, to make people laugh. That gave him joy.
He never wanted any of us to go home. So, he always wanted the good times to keep going, but he was also there in the bad times.
He could be quiet and introspective, and he read a lot.
Lending library.
And he could also be obviously extremely extroverted and the life of the party, which is an understatement of all understatements.
And he was also just extremely smart and knowledgeable.
He knew everything about everything. If you just brought up a subject, he had been there. He knew someone who owned it. He knew someone who died there.
And he could talk to an extremely broad range of people about an extremely broad range of topics.
He had friends who were stockbrokers, lawyers, writers, actors, musicians, painters, and Hells Angels. And he had a way of sort of pulling everyone together and sort of finding some common ground between people.
Like when I read Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point, and he talks about connectors. That's Tom. Tom is the center of a lot of different universes.
He was incredibly dynamic and fun to be around, and he was very into giving himself to a room full of people, but there was just nothing better than when you were alone with him.
It wasn't just that he had an incredible personality and he was able to heighten experiences and make them more interesting and more fun and more eventful. He really had an incredible amount of love in him, you know what I mean? He really did.
Well, I believe that there was really no judgment in Tom, that he was accepting of everybody.
Tom saw the best in everybody, and he had a way of pushing you towards that.
He was always so compassionate towards people, and it's so rare these days. Like, he was very thoughtful.
He was the most loyal person on earth.
No one knew me as well as Tom knew me. There are very few people that could get to the essence and the core of who someone is, and Tom did that really beautifully.
Tom Vaught taught me how to be a good friend.
He was your biggest fan, your biggest ally, and your best friend whenever you needed him, and even when you didn't.
You know, everybody thinks they're his best friend, and I think he was a lot of people's best friend. That wasn't fake or phony.
I think everybody had a unique relationship with Tom Vaught. I think that was part of his magic.
He really loved each of us in a way that is really hard to replicate.
There's something sad about that.
Hello. I just spoke up there, so I'm not going to do it now. Oh, we're Trinacria, by the way. Oh, wow. Burgess, they know who we are. Tom loved this band, and there were nights where we played where there were 3 people in the room, the sound guy, the bartender, and Tom. And when Tom's in the room, it's a packed house. So, that was huge for us to have Tom on our side.
So we're going to start with a song by a guy with whom Tom was a kindred soul, and they shared a first name. This was basically a theme song for Tom and his boys, and we sang this many nights on the streets of New York in the rain. And if anybody knows the words, especially Jeff Grant, please feel free to sing along. For like Tom, we're all rain dogs too. Inside a broken clock, splashing the wine with all the rain dogs. Taxi, we'd rather walk, huddle the doorway with the rain dogs. For I'm a rain dog too. Oh, how we danced and we swallowed the night. It looked as firm as a raven. Oh, how we danced and you whispered to me, you'll never be going back home. The rum poured strong and thin, beat out the dustman with the rain dogs. Aboard a shipwrecked train, give my umbrella to the rain dogs. For I am a rain dog too. Oh, how we danced with the rose of Tralee. Her long hair black as a raven. Oh, how we danced and you whispered to me, you'll never be going back home. Oh, how we danced with the rose of Tralee. Her long hair black as a raven. Oh, how we danced and you whispered to me, you'll never be going back home. We're going to do a Doors song now. It's a song about love and loss, life and death and beyond, and we thought it would be a perfect song to sing with Tom today. Before you slip into unconsciousness, I'd like to have another kiss, another flashing chance at bliss, another kiss, another kiss. The days are bright and filled with pain. Enclose me in your gentle rain. The time you ran was too insane. We'll meet again. We'll meet again. Oh, tell me where your freedom lies. The streets are fields that never die. Deliver me from reasons why you'd rather cry. I'd rather fly. The crystal ship is being filled. 1,000 girls, 1,000 thrills, 1,000,000 ways to spend your time. When we get back, I'll drop a line. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna end with an original song of ours that we used to end our sets with. It was a favorite of Tom's. It's called My Dumb Soul. My dumb soul's gonna take a walk around in its plain white underwear. It's got a moist brown crotch and a stupid grin. It's gonna get something to eat in the kitchen. It's my dumb soul. My dumb soul. My dumb soul don't know just what to do. It keeps on walking into walls and it crawls just like the dough. It is looking for some pitiful crumbs to save my dumb soul. 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 Just my dumb soul.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom.
Am I starting? What? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Buchwald. Yes.
This is Laura Buchwald, ladies and gentlemen.
And I have both of my crutches here, though one is walking off stage right now. The fact that I'm up here is testament to who Tom Vaught was, because this is my biggest fear right here. But Tom knew how to catapult all of us out of our comfort zones. Like all of us, I have more memories of him than I can express right now. To say he left an indelible mark is an understatement. I have friends who met him once and were gutted by his passing, and I have friends who only knew him through photographs and stories, and who shed tears with me. There's so much I miss about him. I miss his laugh, I miss his style, I miss dining with him, I miss meeting him for lunch that turned into nightcaps. I miss our private jokes and the characters that we created. What was so remarkable about Tom was his ability to see in each and every one of us the best things that we have to offer. He saw our flaws as well, but he chose to ignore them. It was a joy to be part of his life and a bittersweet honor to share in his final months and then moments. We're all better, cooler, more interesting, more artistic, wiser, wittier, and kinder for having known him. As we navigate the rest of our own lives, the bright spots and the darkest hours, let's all remember how authentically Tom loved each and every one of us. His capacity for love and for believing in us was boundless. We'll never stop loving him in kind. And now I'm happy to introduce Libby, Grace, Adelaide, Molly, and Amy. Thank you.
Hello. My name's Molly. And years ago, my good friend Libby and I lived in Nederland, Colorado. Nederland! In an old shack. And one night about closing time, there was a knock on the door. Turns out it was Libby's sister who'd brought over a bunch of drunks because the Pioneer Inn had closed and they wanted to party with us. And so it was 2 a.m, but what the heck. And, well, Tom Vaught was among the partiers. So needless to say, that night carved out a lot of lifelong friendships. It was a good party. Libby, about how long do you think that party lasted?
1 month.
Charms whenever I want you. All I have to do is dream. Dream, dream, dream when I feel blue. In the night and I need you to hold me tight whenever I want you. All I have to do is dream. I can make you mine, taste your lips of wine, anytime, night or day. Only trouble is, gee whiz, I'm dreaming my life away. I need you so that I could die. I love you so, and that is why whenever I want you, all I have to do is dream. Dream, 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 dream. I can make you mine, taste your lips of wine, anytime, night or day. Only trouble is, gee whiz, I'm dreaming my life away. I need you so that I could die. I love you so, and that is why whenever I want you, all I have to do is dream. Dream, 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 dream. Dream, 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 dream. Dream, 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 dream.
Thank you. Thank you, folks.
Give it up for the ladies one more time. Hi, everybody. My name is John Pancaldo, or Jack Grace, depending who you ask. It gets complicated. So what we're gonna do right now is something a little different. We're gonna play a song where Tom sings. It's a song Tom and I wrote sometime in the mid-'80s. It's a sailor ballad, and I'm just going to preface. First of all, everybody, thank you for coming. And I want to thank the amazing staff at the Capitol Theater for helping us make this a reality. And I ask you, in the legacy of Tom, to tip generously and show people what we're worth to these lovely people that are working here. Thank you. So, this song, just so you know, it's, as I said, it's a little sailor ballad, and I will tell you one little thing. When I first met Tom, our relationship was based on a lie. The first time we were really hanging out, I was on the school bus coming home near his stop, and I had a Beatles Hard Day's Night book on me. And Tom told me about all the Beatles things he had in his collection. So the next day, I came to his house on the bus. We walked through the Margoloff's driveway, and as we got there, I put my hand out, and a bird crapped on my hand as I went like this. And when I got to Tom's house, he didn't have any of the things he said. But we remained friends from that time. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you Tom Vaught singing Jean Paul.
Song was sung, Jean Paul ruled a mighty sea. Sailing ships of 60 fighting men, a brave young lad was he. Very, very, very strong, Jean Paul, very dashing, debonair, Jean Paul, whisper in my lady's ear, Jean Paul, Jean Paul, Jean Paul, Jean Paul. Jean Paul. Storm did brew as Jean Paul stood on deck. The thunder followed lightning in the sky. The waves crashed down on Jean Paul's mighty hull. 60 men would surely die. Save the mighty, mighty ship. Jean Paul, reach it with a solid grip. Jean Paul, kissing ladies on the lip. Jean Paul, Jean Paul, Jean Paul, Jean Paul. Hey, Jean Paul. Through gaping holes, the ocean in one wave, Jean Paul's ship would surely sink. Well, the men clung tight, for they knew Jean Paul was brave. He said, relax and let me think.
Sparky.
Aye, aye, Captain.
I want you to take to the crow's nest and search for the sister ship.
Aye, the ship.
Claude?
Aye, aye, Captain.
Do you know where the barrels of rum are?
That I do, Captain.
I want you to take the rum and pour the rum out of the barrels.
Aye.
And use the wood to seal the hole.
very, very, very strong. Jean-Paul, very dashing debonair. Jean-Paul, whisper in my lady's ear. Jean-Paul, Jean-Paul, Jean-Paul. Jean-Paul. Aye, aye, Jean-Paul. Jean-Paul. The craft intact, they headed back to port. Their ladies stood to greet them on the shore. Well, the town rejoiced, so sweet but not so short, for 2-3 fortnights, maybe more. Now Jean-Paul stands immortalized in stone in our township's royal square. His silver polished sword with the handle made of bone and tied back ponytailed hair. Now in his statue is standing proudly tall. You can hear the proud man call. Very, very, very strong, Jean-Paul. Very dashing debonair, Jean-Paul. Whisper in my lady's ear, Jean-Paul. Save the mighty, mighty ship, Jean-Paul. Kissing ladies on the lip, Jean-Paul. Treat you with a solid grip, Jean-Paul, 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 Jean-Paul.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor of introducing one of the early forces, nurturing forces behind Tom's character, his brother, Jimmy Davis.
All righty then. Hi, my name's Jimmy Davis, and it's an honor to be here. It truly is. I first met Tom when his mom and my dad started dating, when Tom was knee-high to a grasshopper. They got married, moved in, and Tom became an Armonkian. Soon after that, I went away to college, and we kind of lost touch for a while, as most do when one moves away. Our parents got married, and I did touch base with Tom now and then over the years, and then come to realize what a true, genuine, mindful, sensitive person he had grown up to become. Proof of that is validated today as I look around and see others who are also happy and honored to have known Tom Vaught. Thank you. I think the best example of this, somehow Tom decided to have a family reunion after all the years. Just a little background first. Growing up, one of my favorite pastimes to do was imitations of Tom Jones and Elvis Presley, who were my childhood idols. Young Tom would always get a kick when I would lip sync and gyrate to She's a Lady with Tom Jones. He was one of my biggest and probably my most captive fan in those days, because we were all living in a house there. And anytime I needed to get another voice in the matter, Tom was gladly there to come on in and help either jam or help me with my guitar or whatever. But he was a really energetic guy. And as I recall, there were so many times we had parties over at the Davis house, and maybe some of you were there at some of those legendary parties. But Tom would always come over to me and say, whether it was a party or a gathering, he'd say, "Hey, Jimmy, do your Tom Jones." So, so it was around 2005 that Tom decides to book a family reunion. And where else? Yep, an entertainment venue. And what else? You guessed it, at the local Tom Jones concert coming to town in New York in '05. So Tom gets the tickets. And so Tom, Kevin V, Brother Andy, and me were bellied up to the bar for a pre-performance gathering. It was evident that Tom had been there before because he knew the bartender by name and lots of the people that worked there. So we all got caught up, and we were pretty excited to hear our favorite Tom Jones songs. We were talking about it. For me, my favorite was a little-known ballad that I thought for sure he would perform. So yada, yada, yada. The concert's over. He didn't perform my favorite song of all time. So I asked Tommy V on the way out. I said, "Tom, why wouldn't he have performed that song?" Tom turns to me and says, "You should ask him." I said to myself, "Yeah, right. Tom Jones probably left the building already." I asked him again, "Seriously, why wouldn't he perform that song?" Tom says again, you should ask him. And then I said, oh, Tom's not taking me seriously. So feeling down, Tom puts his arm around me and says, follow me. So I followed him down to the concession stand that's kind of near the rear entrance and exits to the street. So Tom and I bellied up to the concession stand, and Tom asks me my shirt size and orders me a Tom Jones t-shirt. He hands it to me. He says, here, Jimmy, take this. This should make you feel better. And hands it to me. Honestly, it was right there I realized what a mindful, sensitive, and genuine person Tom really was. That shirt wasn't what lifted my spirits that family reunion day. It was the fact that this young man, my young stepbrother, Tom Vaught, understood my genuine disappointment and acted. But that's not the end of the story. It gets better. Just as I'm admiring my new official Tom Jones t-shirt, I hear Tommy V yell out, hey, Tom Jones! Tom briskly walks to the door and stops Tom Jones in his tracks, followed loosely by two large bodyguards, which Tom seemed to have also known. Tom signals me to come over. As I do, I see Tom Vaught with his arm around Tom Jones, complimenting him on his great performance. And I'm going, as I approach, so Tom waits me over. I approach the posse, with a somewhat concerned-looking bodyguards, and Tommy V says, hey, Jimmy, I'd like you to meet Tom Jones. So I shook his hand. He gave me half a smile, and he starts walking away again, now in between his two large bodyguards. At this point, the other fans of mostly screaming middle-aged women began to flock to the posse as the posse moves faster to the exit. Tommy V says to Tom Jones as he's almost all the way out, he says, Jimmy, ask the question. Tom J accelerates to the door as I ask my question with kind of his back to me. And I said, hey, Tom Jones, how come you didn't sing the song, A Boy From Nowhere? Tom Jones' posse was already half out the door, so I never got an answer. But thanks to Tom Vaught, I did get a chance to meet my all-time favorite entertainer, Tom Jones. And more important, giving me a lasting great memory of Tommy Vaught and his genuine, mindful, sensitive character. Tommy Vaught may have left the building, but his spirit lives on. Thank you.
I don't know why my heart beats, only know it does.
People stare at the makeup on his face, laughed at his long black hair, his animal grace.
I want to know who gets into it.
We would be in 7th grade, and we'd be going to Mardi Gras parties in his backyard, and they were out of control. There were live bands singing original music on the front porch. There were fights in the backyard. There were bikes on the half pipe.
Mike and Phil built this thing in Tom's backyard. It was as tall as a house. And Tom would ride this half pipe. He would do full 360s. He was, at a very early age, already very much pushing the boundaries of just experience.
You know, when we met, it was the mid to late 80s in New York City. That was an incredible time to be, you know, let loose on the city in an art school. So he ate all that stuff up. Film, acting, art, music.
Can you give me sanctuary? I must find a place to hide, a place for me to hide.
Tom loved music. Tom and I bonded over music.
Whether it was me influencing him on, listening to jazz, or, he introduced me to like Al Green. Every March it was the Allman Brothers at the Beacon Theater. Then in the summer it was Mountain Jam. Going to a concert with Tom was better.
There will never be another person that can watch a movie in the way that Tom can watch a movie.
He was such a yarn spinner.
Everything had a story, and he knew every story about every corner of the city.
I always wondered how New York City kind of got along without it when he was out of town, but it just seemed like he had that gift for making the street come alive.
Tom really had a very unique style.
He was very proud of his dress and his clothes.
And then Tom would bring patches in. He had one that was so wonderful, and it said, "Legalize freedom."
And his hats, he's very proud of his hats.
Railroad hat for all.
There's nothing I liked better than having him explain to me what was happening in the new issue of Live Steam magazine.
He truly was a poet. Like, we would drink a lot, and then he would spout off words and juxtapositions of words that I had never really heard before.
He really, 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 really loved the arts more than anything, I believe. And women. And whiskey.
Yeah, he liked his corn whiskey. So do I. Woo! That's good stuff.
I was in Boulder and I was playing in a rock and roll band, and Tom and Phil came out to visit for a week or so.
So, how long is Chet gonna be staying with us?
And he wound up staying, I think, for 2 years. Boy, did he ever put a whooping on the bar tab for the band in between Taos, New Mexico and Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Someone could simplify it and say that one of Tom's passions was drinking, but it was more complicated than that. Tom's passion was to meet people and have adventure. His passion was not drinking, it was the adventure of it. But his passion was also drinking.
Tom was an explorer, but not just geographically. He liked to explore people, things, concepts, ideas, foods. Food was definitely one of his favorite things.
We once had a 2-hour conversation about the perfect BLT.
I had a sandwich with shit mayo and Swiss and ham. Oh shit! It happened again.
You know, he was like so concerned with how I was eating my eggs. He's like, Speed, you gotta get in there. You gotta dip that in there. You gotta get this over there. Like, Tom, do not tell me how to eat.
It was extravagant brunches and then like late night cocktails, right? Like late night, early morning cocktails. My first solo date with Tom, we went to brunch, which I didn't understand meant that we would then be going for nightcaps and would wind up at a strip club at 2 in the morning. He was wearing a fake mustache and I was wearing cat ears. And that's when our friendship was born.
Hello again. I'm going to sing a little song that Tom brought to my attention. It's a ukulele Ike number. Oops, we're a little sagging here. Also known as Cliff Edwards, written by Herman Hupfeld, 1933. And this was a song that Tom always promised he would sing with my band, the Pre-War Ponies, and fit right into our repertoire. So it's also ideal for how he liked to spend his nights. It's called I'm a Night Owl. The moon, the stars, the stillness of the night has always cast a spell on me. I'm not ashamed to say rather sleep all day. The lights, the fun, the things that can be done, but one who needs the sun can't see. I'm like that wise old bird whose song you've often heard. Ooh, I'm a night owl. I wake up just as soon as the sun goes down. Start out and I do the town up brown. I make light of the darkness, like my friend in the tree. Round about 3, I'm hootin', still hootin'. Ooh, I'm a night owl. Just like that great bird, I'm a late bird too.
Daria Grace, ladies and gentlemen. We're the Jack Grace Band at times, depending who you. And we're gonna do a song that Tom sort of like, I called him, I remember with this, when I was writing this song, and he's like, no, don't put that lyric there, do this like this. And then every once in a while, he really liked this song, so I knew, he asked me if I would play this at the memorial. And, but every once, there's something about this song, every once in a while, over the years, he would text me and go, John, thanks for writing Rotary Phone. So he really liked this song. So we're gonna play this one for him. You know? Time can move a mountain, make an acorn to a tree. Wash away the ocean, make a living room a street. Let me tell the story about the way it used to be. Rotary phone, don't leave a message for me. You're gonna be an old man too. They take away my smokes and say my blood pressure's high. Doctors used to tell us we could smoke them all the time. I like to tell a story, you don't have to hear it all. Rotary phone must be connected to the wall. Give me lots of whiskey and a really good time. Every day I'm living in my prime. Used to have to go to town to find out all the news. Rotary phone, you can stay home if you choose. Time I fall down the stairs, neighbors come running, say I should take better care. Let me tell the story about the way it used to be. The rotary phone, don't leave a message for me. You're gonna be an old man too. Oh yeah, let's do it again. Try. If you don't do it once, how can you do it again? With the rotary phone and all the things things you may said, my friend. Time can move a mountain, make an acorn to a tree, wash away the ocean, make a living room a street. Let me tell the story about the way it used to be. Let me tell the story about the way it used to be. You're gonna be an old man too. All right. Yeah, it's okay. That's all right. Stuff in my way.
Messed things up. I messed everything up again.
That's right. Give it up for Bruce Martin over here on vocals. Stu Dam on the drums. So we're going to do a song right now that it was the first solo album I ever made. It was right after Mike Vaught had passed. So I had dedicated this song to Mike. So now, as we know, as we get to live, sometimes the hard part of getting to live is that we see our friends go. And Mike was a hard one because it was really a first. Mike Vaught went. It was one of the first we really experienced. And then there was, so I'd like to dedicate this to Mike Vaught, to Tommy and Phil Cassara, and to Tom Vaught. Miss Collins weep, Miss Collins moan. What made her son Louis leave his home? Angels laid him away. Angels laid him away. Laid him 6 feet under the clay. Angels laid him away. Oh, kind friends, now ain't it hard to see poor Louis in a new graveyard? Angels laid him away. Angels laid him away. Laid him 6 feet under the clay. Angels laid him away. When they heard that Louis was dead, all the women folk, they dressed in red. Angels drummer some. Shot one and Louis shot two. Shot Bob Collins, shot him through and through. Angels laid him away. Angels laid him away. They laid him 6 feet on the clay. Angels laid him away. Angels laid him away. Angels laid him away. Stu Dam on the drums. We're gonna bring Bruce to the drums. We're gonna bring Sue Lawson up on stage to do one more. So, one last song we're doing here is a song called Bearded Man. As many of you know, at least in the 21st century, Tom was a bearded man. And Tom used to do a certain routine with us when we would do this song. And virginity loser Sue Lawson is going to play it with us, and it goes like this. Bearded man by the highway, bearded man. Bearded man going my way, bearded man. Bearded man, feeling lonely, bearded man. Bearded man, you're not the only bearded man. Ask him what he's doing and he'll look at you weird. I'm just sitting here growing this beard. Bearded man, feeling lonely, bearded man. Swear! Bearded man, he don't like you, bearded man. Bearded man, he don't need your helping hand. Ask him what he's doing and he'll look at you weird. I'm just sitting here growing this beard. Bearded man, he don't like you, bearded man. Sway. Bearded man by the highway, bearded man. Bearded man going my way, bearded man. Ask him what he's doing and he'll look at you weird. I'm just sitting here growing this beard. All right, the Jack Grace Band. Bring it on. Let's hear it. Fantastic. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Rich Halper, otherwise known as Richie Rock, or as Tom would like to say, The Rock. I'd like to thank you all for coming out here to celebrate the life and love of Tom Vaught. Tom was a kindred spirit and loved by all he met. He was an old soul with a passion for history, especially trains. He used to like to say, I spent a month there one weekend. Now, using Tom's timeline, that makes him probably about a little over 200 years old. And it just goes happened to be, that's when they laid the first railroad tracks. Coincidence? I don't think so. Tom had that unique ability of pulling people together. Most of my dear friends here today, I met through Tom. But most importantly, he introduced me to Kismet, where I met my wife and married her, Monica. I love bringing Tom out to the family gatherings where he'd give speeches and toasts and do his thing. He would serenade my daughter, Ryan Rose, who he loved very much. Tom Vaught, as you know, he was always up for anything. A few years back, a few of us took a trip out to Aspen to see Alan, and there was a big snowstorm, and we showed up about 24 hours late. Of course, our luggage never made it. So another day into it, Monica and I woke up one morning and we decided it was finally time to do a little laundry, but of course we had no clothing because we were wearing all we had. So we wrapped some sheets around us and went toga style. So we're out in the kitchen mixing up a pitcher of Bloody Marys, and Tom woke up from the clanking of a spoon on a pitcher. And he dragged himself up out of whatever bathtub he happened to be sleeping in that night and walked into the kitchen and took one look at us and raised an eyebrow and said, I didn't know it was Toga Saturdays. And he immediately spun around and he was back in a flash wearing a toga. And that toga party was on. But the first time I met Tom Vaught, I'm pretty sure I was in 7th grade, and he was in 6th. He was a year younger than me. And, most of you don't know our middle school, but there was 2 different wings. There was a 6th grade wing and a 7th grade wing. And it was, in between classes, and what Tom was doing over in the 7th grade wing in between classes is, probably somebody else's story. But I happened to be wearing a concert t-shirt that my older brother Steve had bought me, and he walks up to me, and I barely knew him. I'd met him maybe once or twice, and he takes one look at me, and he says, name 3 band members and 3 songs by that band. And I'm like, who is this kid? Fortunately, I knew what I was talking about, so I was in good shape. But let me tell you, I went home and spent the next 2 weeks studying my concert t-shirts in case I ran into him again. Because you don't want to get messed up like that. Anyway, I knew from that point on we'd be friends for life. Anyway, the spirit of Tom Vaught will live within all of us for eternity. To Tom Vaught, yeah!
Yeah. Yes, some of you may know me as Granatelli. My name's Grant Ward. My incredible journey with Tom started when he moved from Larchmont to Armonk, New York. It was the first week of school, and wow, we'd both been thrown out of class at the same time. Who the hell would have thought that? We're sitting there, we're in classrooms from opposite sides of the hallway, not the same classroom, and we're both sitting there, backs against our lockers in a kind of awkward moment the first week at a middle school. And I'm glaring at him, and he's eyeballing me, sizing me up. He's the new kid, right? I'm like, who the hell are you? I'm the troublemaker here. Well, he showed me a thing or two about being a troublemaker. The conversation started. It was a little awkward at first, I'm not going to lie to you. But that was the last awkward conversation we'd ever have. And that was, wow, almost 41 years ago. We bonded that day, and I went over to his house the next day, and we rode BMX bikes around Windmill Farms and terrorized the place. It was a wonderful induction into the Vaught Davis household with, 3 Davis brothers, a Davis, sister, and then the 2 wonderful Vaught brothers, Mike and Kevin. Kevin's here today. Kevin, I love you. He could finish my sentences and he could tell my stories better than me. And I lived them. Maybe that had something to do with the way he could just embellish a story and the way he could dominate a room. And a room this big. He's dominating it right now. I think the favorite story that I told him that he then ended up telling better than me was my experience with Dickie Betts in Las Vegas, where Dickie and I don't know, he got in some tiff with his old lady, and he ended up getting thrown out of the casino he was staying in, and he got taken in a cab to the bar I was working in, graveyard shift. Yeah, graveyard, Eric B., that's right. You know graveyard, Eric. So I'm not going to tell the story of Dickie Betts right now because Tom would tell it better than me. So I love the fact that I could tell him anything. And when I told Tom I want to tour the aisle, and I'd walk into, well, it didn't matter where he was working, the Magician, the Tile Bar, XOU, and Brooklyn Inn, and I'd say, Tom, I want to tour the aisle. And magically, a Manhattan would appear. Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Tom. He was one of 3 friends at my wedding. Tragically, there's only one of them left. He was the godfather of my son, John. He was my confidant, my wartime consigliere, my partner in crime, my personal guide to the top of the Brooklyn Bridge. The man who showed me what it is to find Maslow's hierarchy of needs self-actualization. He was there for a lot of my firsts, as he was for Sue. Thank God he wasn't my first there. He was there for my first time getting drunk on 2 beers with Chance and Gibb. My first Jesse hits, I should call them. That's kind of, I guess that's a politically correct way of talking about a bong. He was there for the first time that I talked about it with him the first time I touched a female's body. And of course, he was there for my first Dead show. Saratoga, 1985. Tragically there, 3 of those guys are gone. The 6 of us went, Mike, Phil, Kevin, Sharon and Tom, and I, of course. And Kev, Sharon, you guys are both here today, and I love you both again. How everything back in the 80s was to the max, right? Everything's to the max. Tune in next week when Slick Slater says, whoops. So when my dog had puppies, we kept one and we named him Max. 6 months later, Tom's brother Mike comes home from Colorado, ironically, with a dog named Max. And suddenly, in some kind of Tom Vaught-esque way, I became Max 2. Meanwhile, I had Max first, and he became Max 1. I would call him on the phone and say, hey, Max 1, this is Max 2, come in. This would start our conversations and get the ball rolling, and then we'd decide what kind of antics we were going to get into, and where we're going to terrorize and windmill next, and what's happening, where's the party. Then there was a bond that he had with my parents, an incredible bond with both of them that I didn't even have. He would spend hours, endless hours, with my father, watching Steve McQueen films. Yeah, I think there might be a Steak song there. And then, spaghetti westerns, all the Eastwood stuff. And I think that's where Tom really built his love for that genre of film that he would go on to study. And it was because he was hanging out with my dad, and my dad would explain to him about, what it is, and they're all made in Italy, and he was telling him all about how a spaghetti western was made. And Tom was fascinated by Grant Sr.'s knowledge, a lust for that he kept until his dying days. I know you guys all know about his passion for those films. He had a great, great, great connection with my mother, Lydia, who ironically we also lost to cancer. They shared the same birthday, April 7th. They had the same lust for the arts that a lot of you have, but it doesn't run through the rest of society the way it runs through this crowd right here. My mother, she had been a University of Miami art student, and she was a producer of art shows in Bedford, New York for cancer care, and ironically, she died of cancer. That's fucked up. So they connected, and they had a love, and she loved his spirit and his freedom of expression. And that to me was awesome, and she encouraged my friendship with Tom no matter how much trouble we got into together. And believe me, there was a lot of trouble. She took me shopping in 9th grade for clothes, and Tom came with us. And we went to Macy's at the Galleria Mall in White Plains. My mom would have bought Tom anything he wanted, but Tom decided that he was going to liberate a pair of purple Guess jeans from the women's department. Yeah, this was 9th grade, and he was going to look like Adam Ant walking down the street, and he did. My mother just laughed it off, told Tom that she would have bought them for him, and it was okay. The store was fucking overpriced, and it was no skin off her ass. Look, I could stand here for hours and tell you guys stories and tell you about my love for Tom, but you guys all feel it. You guys know it. It's in this room. It's on that screen. So, Max 1. This is Max 2. One more tour of the aisle.
Tune in next time for more Haji and Bali.
The monk bought lunch.
He bought a little. Yes, he did. Oh! This is the best part of the trip. This is the trip, the best part.
He was always about
getting the last bit of juice out of every moment. And often that would involve situations that might not have been, the best thought out situations.
His life and his playfulness happened on Fire Island, his total freedom around all of the people that he loved, also feeling that freedom. And, nobody got hurt too bad.
Holy shit!
I mean, it's kind of amazing that none of us drowned, actually.
It was like sleepaway camp with your 12 most twisted friends, and Tom was at the center of it all.
Riff, he was the best riffer that there was. And he never stumbled, which was impressive. When we were in Napa Valley, we developed a product called the Napakin, which was a wine-soaked cocktail napkin. And it was for when you want the wine, but you don't have the time.
At Vaught's, show ponies are like martinis. 2 is perfect, 3 is too many, and 4 is not enough.
He wasn't a fucking saint. That's for sure.
He liked to take things every now and then when he was out. He'd put on a sari, an Indian sari, in front of the guy who was selling it, and then he'd leave and be like, I'm wearing the sari, and you'd be like, you can't do that, and that, drove me nuts, and also, he was so oddly charming.
He used to push the envelope. There's the legend of Tom taking a paint chip off of Picasso. Somebody pointed out to him that if everybody did that, it would be a blank canvas. Well, Tom said nobody else has the balls to take a paint chip off of Picasso.
If we're not supposed to do something, that's the thing that we should do. One of Tom's favorite things was sneaking into places. He would call it, the force. We went to the Frick, and there was a line around the block, and there was a little old lady coming out the giant door of the Frick. And we, instead of waiting in the line, we went, helped the little old lady, and then walked into the Frick backwards so we could see the Rembrandts.
I would bought him a $80 ticket to go see the Allman Brothers. He'd have it in his hand and still work the guys at the door to try and get in for free. He loved doing that. That was Tom. It was the challenge.
I was working with him one time, and it's a bunch of douchebags, and it's a full bar. All of a sudden, there was just a silence, and some dude was like, hey, somebody put on some music. And Tom looks at him and goes, why don't you sing for us, motherfucker?
I think the most memorable part of the wedding was when Tom emerged from Central Park Pond at the boathouse, completely naked.
So one night at XOU, Tom came out of the bathroom completely nude, except with his hat on, and sat at the end of the bar for the rest of the night, as if that was a totally normal thing to do.
We're in the Burgess's living room. There's a fire in the fireplace. There's a lot of family around, some grandparents.
My father-in-law was very taken with Tom at first, who's that guy? I had this other friend who walked into the house with a nice Argyle kind of Christmas sweater.
Tom didn't want anything to do with that sweater.
And he said, what's with this Argyle sweater? He took it off of him and he threw it into the fire. Through the years, he would always say, how's your friend Tom? But who forgets a guy who throws somebody's sweater into the fire?
Hi, where's steak?
And it's low, low, how low do they go? They take
take your heart out, leave it by a payphone. Search your pockets, you'll be fumbling for a dime. Ain't no one left to call up on this one, this time. It's low, low, how low do they go? I got the news from a California payphone. She says I should write a song for her. How do you like me now? Please excuse me, my car is a mess. I wasn't planning on having any guests. There's a corkscrew in the glove compartment, and I promise you, baby, I'll try to drive real slow. I try to keep it on the road. I grab my fear, I kiss them straight right up on the lips. You all know Tilly, she got them motherly hips. Went for a ride and the sirens screamed. Jumped out the corner, took my bottle, and left me. And it's low, low, how low do they go? You take your thoughts, you could shove them up a payphone. She says I should write a song for her. How do you love me now? Baby, you still loving me now? Please excuse me, my car is a mess. I wasn't planning on having any guests. There's a corkscrew in the glove compartment, and I promise you, baby, I'll try to drive real slow. Try to keep it on the road. Take your heart out and leave it by a payphone. Search your pockets, you'll be fumbling for a dime. Ain't no one left to call up on this one, this time. And that's low. And that's low. Well, you gotta get so low. And that's low. And that's low. Oh, that's low. Yeah, boy.
How you guys doing? We're Steak. I'm Eric. I knew Tom I was one of Tom's oldest friends. I was in the Larchmont part of things, the cool part, before he moved up to that hick-ass town. We were getting in trouble early, cutting school, going to Playland. 6th grade, raiding Lachlan McPhail's liquor cabinet when Tom was 10 and I was 11. Problems, but this song here is called Tequila, oddly enough about drinking, and during this song for years, Tom would come up and buy us a shot of tequila during the song. And Tom is the reason, actually, that we got to play Steak the Capitol Theater. So we want to thank Tom Vaught for having us play at the Capitol Theater.
Yeah, boys!
Thank you. This song is called Tequila. What has it done to you, my friend? Hit you between those beady little eyes, the way you've fallen to your knees. I know who wins this time. Every time. Tequila! Lie, tequila. Tequila! Lie, tequila. Tonight we ride tequila waves into the shores of day. Tomorrow we spend picking up the pieces of yesterday. Try to remember what you did, or even what you said. Where are my glasses? Thank you, Grant Ward. In the stranger's bed. Oh, tequila. Lie, tequila. Tequila. Lie, tequila. Oh, tonight we ride tequila waves into the shores of day. Tomorrow we spend picking up the pieces of yesterday. Oh, Johnny! Try. Try. Poquito.
Oh, poquito, mo poquito.
Poquito. Oh. Poquito. Poquito. Tequila. Lie, tequila. Tequila, lie, tequila. Tequila, lie, tequila. My fault. Thank you, Grant Ward, for continuing the tradition. And you guys are all welcome to continue that tradition every time we play live.
Give it up for Mike J on the bass. Yeah, he's taking his tequila with him. So we have a little thing for in the steak world. Mike J has become the bass player for Steak, and when he joined us, if you know the Rolling Stones, he's like the Ron Wood of Steak. He was around. Yeah, it's official. You're hired. And he was around for when Steak started. So when he joined Steak, we didn't have to catch him up on all the old stories. But something that the original bass player for Steak was someone that became a very close friend of Tom's. And he's a very close friend of ours. And it's very rare that we get to have the original lineup of Steak, but we have a treat. We'd like to welcome TJ Primetime Thomas to the stage.
Yeah.
Primetime. Primetime's back.
We did it, Tom. We got it. We got the band back together for you.
This is one of the first songs we wrote, and it has a reference to our gym teacher in Armonk named Al Campbell. Thanks, Al. All right, near arm, far ankle breakdown, ready wrestle. Pancaldo, you wanna play games?
Stay after school. Stay after school.
Do a little ditty in a get-down ballroom. Drinking till I'm silly, but I gotta get ahead. And I sing near arm, far ankle breakdown. 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 We'll wanna move ya. We'll wanna wrestle with the cats. We'll wanna move ya. We'll wanna wrestle with the cats. We're gonna wrestle. Alright, you get a dessert, an entree, and one pat of butter. I repeat, one pat of butter, which is not to be thrown around. Not to be thrown around. Do a little ditty in a get-down ballroom. Drink it till I'm silly, but I gotta get ahead. And I sing near arm, far ankle breakdown. 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 ditty in a get-down ballroom. Drink it till I'm silly, but I gotta get ahead. And I say, near arm, far ankle breakdown. 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 We'll wanna move ya. We'll wanna wrestle with the cat. We'll wanna move ya. We'll wanna wrestle with the cat. We love you, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Tom Vaught.
Tom's father, Dick Vaught, was a Marine. And Tom used to say that he wished he had more of a chance to get to know his father. I think his father left the family when Tom was quite young. But Tom had a small photograph of his father in his military outfit, uniform. And one day he came and he said, I want to write a song about this picture of my father that I never really got to know as much as I wanted to get to know. So we're going to play that song now of Tom singing the song about his father. He called the song Photograph. And we'll look at some more beautiful pictures of Tom on the screen.
Imagine I tried to laugh and we see the light, we see the camera flash, but we cover our eyes from circumstance. Torch, few loving words to say, and we see the light, we see the camera flash, but we cover our eyes from memories of circumstance.
right in a drain ditch, caught on a limb. You know better, but I know him. Like I told you, what I say, steal your face right off your head. Now he's gone. Now he's gone. Lord, he's gone. He's gone. Like a steam locomotive rolling down the track. He's gone. He's gone. And nothing's gonna bring him back. He's gone. 9 miles scared, only 10-mile ride. He was hot as a pistol, but cool inside. A cat on a tin roof, dogs in a pile. Nothing left to do but smile, smile, smile. He's gone. Now he's gone. Lord, he's gone. He's gone. Like a steam locomotive rolling down the track. He's gone. He's gone. Nothing's gonna bring him back. He's gone. Going where the wind don't blow so straight. Maybe off of some high cold mountain chain. I lost one around, but the price wasn't anything. A knife in the back and more to say. Oh, right in a drain ditch, caught on a limb. You know better, but I know him. Like I told you, what I say, I steal your face right off your head. Now he's gone. Lord, he's gone. He's gone. Like a steam locomotive rolling down the track. He's gone and nothing's gonna bring him back. He's gone. Ooh, nothing's gonna bring him back. Ooh, nothing's gonna bring him back. Oh, 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 nothing's gonna bring him back. Ooh, nothing's gonna bring him back. Ooh, nothing's gonna bring him back.
I'm a little shorter. Hi everyone, I'm Melissa Gilardi. This is my daughter Sia, my son Dash, and my husband Rob. None of us would be standing here right now if it weren't for Tom Vaught, especially these two, because he introduced us. We wouldn't have met him. I wanted to start by thanking everyone who participated in the videos that I created for today. Thank you so much for the music suggestions, the interviews, the pictures. We couldn't have done it without you. Tom would have loved to have been here. He talked to me extensively about making this video. He helped me make the one that I made for Phil Casera when he died. And this summer, over his last trip, as Rob likes to call it, the Great East Coast Tour of Tom Vaught, 2018, we sat down in Fire Island, and he told me specifically some things he would like to see in the video. But the most important thing was he had helped me make Phil's video extensively, and it was a really hard process for me because I loved Phil very much, as I loved Tom. And Tom turned to me this summer, and after telling me what he wanted me to do with the video, told me, "I'm pretty sure this one's gonna kill you, Melissa." So there's one more piece. I hope it doesn't kill you guys. It's sad and it's poignant, but it's a tribute to our friend Tom, and I hope that it helps all of us remember and celebrate his life.
So before the video, I'd like to, this is really hard. I'd like to raise a glass to a man who all of our children loved, all of our parents loved. He was the most unique man I've ever met. He was my best friend. And let's say Tom Vaught as loud as we can say it. 1, 2, 3. Tom Vaught!
You know, cancer's not my style. Everybody knows me. It's not my style. It's just been 49 years of 100% living. And I guess they just want me to take a little bit of a break before I get back on the road.
Take me to the station.
Near the end, Tom told me that he would prefer to get hit by a train, but didn't want to ruin an engineer's day.
I was there when we got Tom right out of the hospital, and he was really, really sick. It was a moment that I've never seen in Tom, where he was scared, but it wasn't so much scared about dying. It was scared about not being able to live life.
people banded together to raise money to help take care of him. And people from all over the country flew out to see him, constantly calling him and checking on him and writing to him. Tom was incredibly blown away by just the sort of outpouring of support.
All of the positive love and energy that he had put out to his friends had come back to him and had given him the strength to fight this disease.
Charming the woman next to him on the bike in physical therapy and, pretending that they were riding through Paris and cheering her up. His ability to even take a horrible situation and find ways to create beauty within it.
You think, of course Tom's gonna beat this. If anybody's gonna beat this, it's Tom.
Everybody's still holding out hope that something was gonna turn. And I thought it had in Fire Island. Like, he looked amazing, robust, and he fell in love with Georgia, and that was very exciting, and it was really fun to just watch Tom be Tom.
In the days that followed, they found that it had spread much more widely than anyone thought.
And I picked up the phone and it was Tom. And it was difficult for him to get words out. And I just said to him, Tom, I wish there was something I could do. And he said, you're doing it. Keep kicking ass.
I remember when he actually passed away, and the room was packed. It was a packed house.
With John playing guitar and the sun setting on the Rockies and all of us there, and he died absolutely knowing he was loved, surrounded physically by love. It just seemed like a natural sort of rhythmic, letting go.
When he died, it was such a huge kind of hole in our communal tapestry that, it'll never be filled.
Once in a while, there are these huge, humongous, historic characters who walk among us. And none of us are ever the same afterwards.
He was just an example for have a little balls, have a little curiosity, and have a little compassion, and get out there and do it. And don't be constrained by conformity. Say fuck it sometimes and just go, miss the last ferry from Fire Island and say I don't know, what am I gonna do?
Don't think, just live. And do it with gusto and with passion.
Tom kissed on the lips and he told you he loved you, and that is rare, and there's nothing better than that.
The burden is on us, to be that passionate about life.
Sometimes he made me so angry and so crazy. It was so, But even if I didn't like him sometimes, I'll never love anybody more than I love Tom Vaught.
It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments my scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
I don't even feel like he died too young. That he died when he died, and he packed a lot of living in his life, and it's not a tragedy. It's just the end of his story.
It was a train that took me away from here, but a train can bring me home.
His last text to me was, "We're gonna be fine, buddy. A little tough right now, but we're gonna get better. I love you, partner. Tea, top hat, lightning bolt, martini glass."
That dude did it for 50 years, Tom Vaught style. If anybody's ever earned the right to have their life celebrated rather than having their death mourned, it's Tom Vaught.
I love you all individually and as a group. Take my hand. Let's kick some ass. I'll see you out there.
I'd like to thank Melissa for making me follow that. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jeff Gran. I did have to look at the paper to remember that. Tom asked me to say a few words to all of you after he died. But before I do, I'd like to thank the people who put this event together. Jack and Alan and Melissa, who put together a wonderful, wonderful video, which all of you participated in, and Rob, and countless others that I'm forgetting. But I know it was a Herculean effort, and a difficult one, because as you all know, Tom's nature was such that we all feel entitled to a piece of Tom. We all feel entitled to a say in how we say goodbye. But he wanted us to do it together, and here we are. Tom was not a traditional person, and he did not want a somber event to mark his passing. He wanted it to be a celebration of his life. And what I think we can all agree, it was an extraordinary life. A week ago today would have marked Tom's 51st birthday. And despite the severity of his condition and his poor prognosis, when he was first diagnosed back in March of 2018, I, like a lot of you, was beginning to think that he could do the impossible and outrun this disease. As Richard Grant remarked to me last night over dinner, Tom didn't get cancer, cancer got Tom. And Tom gave cancer one hell of a ride. But I'm convinced that the reason he lasted as long as he did is because of the tremendous outpouring of love and support he received from everybody in this room, including people who could not be here today. He was deeply touched by the text and the letters everyone sent to him, the notes on Facebook, and as you all know, Tom would never have been on Facebook, but we would sit by his hospital bed or sit in his house in Fort Collins and read him the things that people had written. He was deeply humbled when so many of you dropped everything that was happening in your lives to fly out there and help take care of him. He regretted not getting back to everybody's texts, not responding to the calls, but he just didn't really have the strength to do it. But he wanted me to tell each and every one of you, thank you, and he loves you. I first met Tom in 1986 when we were both attending the School of Visual Arts film program. I want to give a little shout out to the SVA folks. While Tom actually didn't graduate from SVA, he pretended he did, and he would always say so with pride. But it was formative years for a lot of people in this room, as college often is, and I'm proud to say I'm still friends with many of the SVA folks, as Tom was, right up through today. To be honest, when Tom and I met one another, we didn't really like each other. He thought I was a sort of crass punk rock kid, and I thought he was a dirty hippie. And we were both right. But it was through the urging of a common friend, Burgess Speed, that Tom and I came together. So I'm going to tell you a little story about the first night I spent with Tom Vaught, which I think illustrates some of his best qualities. We were both living in a YMCA, Sloan House, that our college had leased out as a makeshift dorm. And at the urging of Burgess, I went down and knocked on Tom's dorm room and suggested we have a drink. Tom said he was too strapped for cash to go out to a bar, but why didn't we just grab a bottle of wine, hang out, and listen to music? So we went around the corner and bought about a gallon of Gino Monte wine for $4.99. And as we were leaving the liquor store, a panhandler just, hit us up for money, which back in 1980s New York happened constantly. And I kept walking, but Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out all the money he had, which was only a couple of dollars, and gave it to the man. And as the guy hurried away, I said, "You just told me you didn't even have money for beer. Why are you giving this guy the last dollar in your pocket?" And he said, "He looks like he needs it more than I do." And we spent the rest of the evening drinking that awful wine and telling our life stories to each other, the way that people in college at that age share all their secrets. And at one point, he read me a passage from On the Road, which, as many of you know, was one of Tom's favorite books. It was the line that described Dean Moriarty as eager for bread and love. He loved that line and he wanted to share it with me. He felt like he was introducing me to something new. In fact, he was so excited to share it with me that I didn't have the heart to tell him I already knew it. And similarly, I played him one of my favorite songs, which is a number by Bruce Springsteen called "It's Hard to Be a Saint in the City." I thought he would identify with the lyrics, "I was born blue and weathered, but I burst just like a supernova." And of course he did, but he didn't learn those lyrics from me. He already knew it because David Bowie had covered it. And we didn't tell each other the truth of this story until years later. We had a good laugh about it. And it may sound like the worst O. Henry story ever, but it illustrates what I think was Tom's best quality, his generosity. And I'm not just talking about generosity with money. Tom was always generous with his own money, even more generous with other people's money. And for those of you who loaned him money over the last decade, he's not paying you back. But Tom was generous in spirit. Tom made your interests his interests. The things that you were passionate about, Tom became passionate about. And when Tom honed his attention and focus on you, you felt like the most important person in the room. Who here has not received over the years a postcard, a letter, a little bauble or trinket from Tom that he said, "Oh, I was going through Durango and I found this in an old hardware store and I thought of you"? When Melissa was shooting this video and she asked me, "Everyone I've talked to tells me that Tom was their best friend. Why do you think that could be?" And I think the answer is simple. Tom was everybody's best friend. He had so much love to give, and he gave it so freely to all of us. Now, Tom was not perfect. He could be selfish and irresponsible and insensitive at times. I can hear him right now saying, "Shut up, Dad," which is what he used to say when I used to reprimand him. He could be loud and brutish. I've lost count of the number of bars and restaurants he got us thrown out of, including by Rob. And he was the only middle-class white guy who'd been arrested more than me. But at his best, Tom was a fierce and loyal friend who was always there for you in the darkest times. At his best, he would spend the last of his money to buy a stranger a sandwich, or a drink. At his best, he was open and accepting to all people from all walks of life, except millennials and their damn cell phones. At his best, he was a fearless adventurer. He was not intimidated by any new experience because he desired that knowledge and experience so deeply. And he made you push your own boundaries. We've heard about a lot of first times tonight, and I'm not going to go into some of those. But I'm sure everyone in this room has a great story of something they did that they never would have dreamed of doing if Tom Vaught hadn't been by their side. At his best, he was an amazing storyteller and gifted performer. At his best, he was a kind and weird uncle to all of our children. At his best, he was a kind and affectionate friend. He would forgive you anything. I can't think of a time we didn't part with a hug or where he didn't affirm his love for me, even when he was mad at me. And at his best, he had a laugh that could fill a room, a tireless and joyful contagion. I'm going to miss his laugh most of all. And it was these wonderful qualities that enabled Tom to live an extraordinary life. His generosity of spirit was contagious and opened up a world of possibilities for him. This is a short but not exhaustive list of some of the things Tom accomplished. He was the lead singer of the band Ropes of Sand. He had a successful voiceover career, including stints as the voice of MTV, Pepsi, Subway, and one of his favorites, Captain Morgan. He appeared in countless off-Broadway plays, short films, and he was even in a couple of feature films. He volunteered to clean up debris in a town in California that had been devastated by the wildfires, clearing up away all the burnt rubble by day and sleeping in a cot in a Salvation Army shelter at night. He drove a Steve locomotive. He searched for buried treasure in the Sierra Madre. That's really true. You can read it in a book called God's Middle Finger, if Tom hasn't read you every passage that he was in himself. For decades, he appeared as Pirate Tom, delighting scores of children on the beaches of Block Island. He raised money to help people in need, whether it was a friend dying of cancer or a street performer who was about to be evicted from his apartment. He also loved to write and had essays and poetry published in several magazines. And he had an uncanny ability to sneak into any movie or concert event undetected. I once saw him sneak into the Broadway production of Waiting for Godot just by walking in backwards. And while he often liked to quip that he had no regrets, that wasn't true. He regretted not being more disciplined about his acting career and felt like he had missed some opportunities. He deeply regretted not being there for his mom when she was sick. Now, I had the privilege of helping take care of Tom, and on behalf of Tom as well as myself, I'd like to thank Brian Long and Chance Kelly. Many of you received angry phone calls from Chance Kelly demanding that you drop everything and spend 2 weeks with Tom in Colorado. And there were so many people involved in the effort, I could not begin to thank them all. But I do want to point out specifically Jason Filani, Laura Buckwalt, and Steve Racine. Now, Tom passed on November 3rd, 2018, surrounded by his friends and family. I think there must have been about 20 of us jammed into that hospital room, gathered around his bed, comforting him, whispering to him that we loved him. He died as the sun set, looking out over at the Rockies, with beautiful music being played for him in the room by Al Feldman and John Caldo. And while that may be one of the saddest moments of my life, it was also beautiful, because in his passing, I sort of connected with what I think is Tom's greatest legacy. Because we know it's not financial. None of you are getting anything. But because Tom lived such an extraordinary life, filled with love, generosity, and enthusiasm, he managed to bring people together from all walks of life. And it really hit home for me as I was standing there in the hospital room, surrounded by all different people, some of whom I knew well, some of whom didn't know at all. But take a look around you. You've been all here for the last 4 hours. I bet every one of you knows 10 or 20 people here that you met exclusively through Tom. And he had an amazing gift of bringing disparate people together, of finding common ground. He hated it when we fought with each other. He hated it when we spoke ill of one another. He took a lot of joy in his friends, and he thought of all of us as one big extended family. And we had a conversation about this last September when he was staying with my wife Carrie and I. And I asked him what he hoped for after he died. And he said, "I just want it to go on. I hope everyone finds a way to stick together." So let's honor Tom by doing that. Let's be kind and empathetic to one another. Let's show each other the type of forgiveness that he would have showed us. It's okay, my daughter gave this to me. Really. Dad of the year. Tom, I, along with everyone else in this room, will miss you terribly. But I will always carry your laughter and your generosity in my heart. And I thank you for that. I wish you well on your travels. And I think John knew, and I think everyone agrees, maybe one of the best ways to end tonight, because like all things associated with Tom, it's running a little long, is for you to hear the music that he heard as he died. So I believe Jack, Daria, and Burgess, and Gabe are going to play us out. Thank you.
That's Jeff Grand, ladies and gentlemen. When we were in the room with Tom, someone said at one point, "Will you play guitar?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to play guitar." And then it seemed like it was time to play guitar, like he wanted it. So we played the song, and I saw him relax. And I just want to thank you all for coming to the memorial. And we're going to just end on this. And this is what Tom heard. We love you, Tom. Thank you, people. Please join us next door at Garcia's, where we're going to continue. We'd love to talk to you and see you. And please tip generously to your bartenders. Thank you.